That's moving slow. There we go. Tweet it out. The mic. I put your mic on here. Let's see how this works. No. Laughing at me on YouTube, probably. That's all right.
All right, that's good.
Hit record. Hello there, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. It is Wednesday, November the 23rd. Scott and I normally record on Thursdays, but we're going to take tomorrow off and exhale a little bit from the busy month of November. Luckily, neither one of our teams plays on Thursday this year. Both of us, they play each other, though, and we will have our quarterback has been benched, the number 2 pick in the draft 2 years ago, and your quarterback is hurt. I think this is just a microcosm of a lifelong of misery.
Yeah, I think so. It's been it's everything that we've ever experienced, really. I mean, the Zach Wilson woes are, he kind of reminds me of Cade McNown in some respects of what he dealt with the Bears. And then Justin Fields, yeah, I mean, he's played really well. I've really enjoyed him. It's the first quarterback that I can say I've enjoyed watching for the Bears since, I don't know, I was born. Let's put it that way. And now, of course, he's banged up. So other than that, how was the parade, Mrs. Kennedy? But that's kind of our football, microcosm. I mean, I felt for you actually on Sunday. I didn't get a chance to watch really any football on Sunday, but when when I saw that play, I thought, has there been ever more Jets play and Jets game than that one?
Yeah, the long run of misery since Bill Belichick turned down the Jets and went to New England continues. I am Rob Howe, and that is the other voice you're hearing is Scott Docterman from The Athletic. And again, this is the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. We are going to look back at Minnesota, look ahead to the Friday's game against Nebraska and the implications there. We'll talk a little bit Iowa basketball, not a ton. This is going to be heavy football this week. A lot of time to talk about basketball moving ahead, but I did not make the trip to Minnesota. Scott did. I certainly watched the game and did a review of that with Jovan Johnson and Jordan Canzeri. I would encourage people to listen to that, the Rapid Reaction podcast. Those guys had some really good insight. Asked them who they would prefer, Michigan or Ohio State in the championship game. So give that a listen. Maybe Scott and I will give our opinion on that as well. Another just kind of Minnesota, maybe microcosm's the word of the day for us, Scott, but that was kind of microcosm of this season for Iowa, especially this second half of the season. Early this season, they probably lose that game. Now they figure out a way to win it.
It was a typical Iowa-Minnesota fist fight. And everything the Minnesota brought it, man. They were tenacious, especially the offensive line. Mo Ibrahim, I think any Iowa observer has to have a lot of respect for him and the way he plays, because, I mean, it was a hammer to a nail. I mean, now the wood was thick, but it was a hammer to a nail the way they played. But Iowa's defense, it bent some more. Gave up 263 rushing yards, the most since LaShawn Johnson in 1993, the most in a Big Ten game since 1966 by the Hawkeyes, since Clinton Jones from Michigan State. Yet they didn't surrender. And you saw an All-American player this year, an all-timer, in my opinion, in Iowa history, come through with massive key plays and clutch moments to win this game, and Jack Campbell, of course. And so Yeah, this was finding a way to win when a lot of things were against you. And it really wasn't the home crowd that was against them, because a lot of them decided not to show up because it was -1 on the wind chill factor, and don't blame them so much. But when you have Sam Laporta out, that was a big factor for Iowa. When you have Monty Pottebaum, who's really a versatile guy for Iowa, out, and your offense it's zero outside, and you're trying to get something accomplished, and your defense is kind of getting chipped away at it, to be able to come up with that win, man, that is, that's really up there. And victories that after the season in history, you're going to look at it, and maybe it's not a top 15 or 20 win. It's not the prettiest win, but it's a gutsy win. And I think it's one that they should hang on the Iowa mantelpiece as this is how you get it done when there's really no other way to get it done.
Yeah, and obviously it was huge. It was what we saw Saturday early was Illinois and Michigan, and Illinois playing its ass off and almost beating Michigan, losing, opening that door for Iowa. And really, we'll talk more about Nebraska. The Minnesota game on paper should be harder than Nebraska. That was the game that Iowa had to have. So getting that, the pressure's on you to get that game, and Iowa delivered in the clutch again. And I don't want to beat a dead horse with the Illinois game, but I was thinking about this riding back from Cedar Rapids today. If that call goes the other way at that end of that Illinois game, and what's that quarterback's name for Illinois, the backup?
The backup now. You got me going.
Art Sikowski.
Art Sikowski. Yeah.
How can I forget Art? How can I forget Art? But, if he's not ruled down there, Moss returns that, and Iowa wins that game. Those breaks weren't going Iowa's way early in the season. Iowa wasn't making its own breaks either, and that's what switched here. You talked about it, just watching that replay of Riley Moss deflecting that pass, which I don't know why Minnesota was throwing the ball there. That's another, I'm baffled at that. But I'm watching Moss's face as he's tipping that ball. He's looking around to say, which one of my teammates is going to catch this thing? Mm-hmm. It's not an accident. Those guys know what they're doing. They they practice the tip drill. Perfectly executed play. Campbell brings it back for a touchdown that's not ruled a touchdown, which pissed me off because in my preview I had 17-10. But be that as it may, the defense has continued to play at an elite level. Special teams is close to that, and the offense has figured out how to contribute. And that's really what this team could be this year, based on circumstances. And it's peaking at the right time.
Yeah, exactly. And, we could look back and there are 2 losses that just go, man, there's no way they should have lost them. Well, they did. And now here they are. And I think this is, the microcosm, the word of the day is true, is finding a way to win when it doesn't look likely. And Jack Campbell, I'm going to call it forever the missed 6.
That's good.
Because the official, that was an idiotic call. I mean,
plus it's a dumb rule that you can't review that.
Well, don't blow the effing whistle. Period. Don't blow it. It's under review. You can come right back and go, oh yeah, he stepped out, or we think he stepped out, or you mark it that way. But if you're going to have it under review, then don't blow the whistle, because that ends the play. And you called it that way, and that was ridiculous because. Iowa took advantage the very next play with that pass from Spencer Petras to Luke Lachey down the center of the field. Their play action set it up. The safety ran to the ran to the line of scrimmage, and Lachey just went right past him. So, but if Iowa doesn't score, if that goes in overtime, if they lose, or even if that, even probably an even worse judgment by the officials at the end was when Iowa ran the ball. I think it was LaShawn Williams, and they reviewed it to see if it was a fumble. They didn't start the clock again. and that was just as bad, because that's exactly what I was trying to accomplish, is soak up as much time as possible and not give them any. And then Iowa had to call a timeout, which ended up freezing the kicker to begin with. And I'm like looking, I'm like, can Iowa just freeze its own kicker? And it's 0 outside. I mean, Jesus. But overall,
the situation, timeouts and Minneapolis are just going to be a story, I guess, for the rest of time.
Exactly. So, you got these situations and you're just baffled by it all. But overall, what it comes down to is a player like Riley Moss, an All-American last year, the reigning defensive back of the year in the Big Ten, knocked the ball away to an all-time great. And he took advantage of it and ran up the field. And Jack had some things to say afterwards. And, he doesn't he doesn't talk smack, but he did kind of there. And he's like, I don't know, I'm an enterprise leadership business major. And I thought I was, I thought I was in bounds. And everybody's like, oh yeah, he was in bounds. And then of course you watch it, he was. And it's like, what a signature moment in that career. They've had 3 defensive touchdowns called back for different reasons this year. I mean, Moss's, as you said earlier, and if it's just a little bit blurrier, but you give the officials credit in that situation. They didn't call him down either. Mm-hmm. They let it play out, and they went to replay. That's the way they called it. Fine. Hey, no complaints here. And then of course, Terry Roberts had a pick 6 that was called back because of an offsides penalty. So, but overall, when they needed a play, they made the play. And they made the play in offense, defense, and special teams, all within that final 2 minutes. They had the pick, they had the 33-yard pass, and then they had the field goal by a true freshman kicker who's gotten better and better. And so overall, they did what they needed to do to win, and they did. And PJ, it's killing him. I mean, he, after the game, saying, we did everything but win, and then just, you didn't, and it's your fault. Because you shouldn't have called passes. You shouldn't have ran. I mean, and you think about that drive where he fumbled, and that's his 14th run in a 16-play drive.
And he had just come off the field dinged up.
Right.
And Trey Potts is a decent backup. If you're going to run him.
Exactly. I mean, the cold, you cannot describe it. Just me sitting in my basement, I made sure before the game, now you shoot photos so you can laugh at me all you want, but I made sure before the game, I'm like, I'm going out there. And I went out there for about 45 minutes just because I felt like I needed to get a feel for it if I can actually try to describe it. I can't just say, oh, it was cold. I got to be out there. I got to feel it. I got to experience it. I'm out there while they're warming up, just so I can make sure to, hey, I know what they're dealing with at least. And so it was, it hits different in Minnesota, as I've always said. It just, you go up there and it's like, okay, it's the difference between being really cold in Iowa and feeling like the polar ice cap.
Yeah, it's like that. It's just like a cold that just is like a knife inside. It just penetrates you like a different, no other type of cold. And the Jack Campbell thing was unfortunate because it could have been, not that he needs a signature moment, but it could have been for him. I guess the positive you take out of it is what you mentioned, Scott. The offense was able to contribute at the end of that game and maybe give itself some confidence. There's going to be 3 games left, but it's still, those guys felt like they contributed at a key moment. All 3 phases did. Kicker, Drew Stevens, we talked about it, I think, since back in the spring, if not earlier, about, the place kicking and how that was going to be a key and would they be able to figure that out? They figured it out. There was no doubt in my mind he was going to make that thing when he came in there. I thought Tim Brando kind of exaggerated how close it was at the end of that game. But, it's a memorable win in a rivalry game. And an important rivalry game, and one, as Scott said, that people will remember for a long time. They'll remember, that 2022 game at Minnesota, where Jack Campbell got a fumble recovery and then an interception, and then Iowa won the game basically on a walk-off, for lack of a better term. And it was a key component, a key game in winning another division title.
Exactly. Now, they still have one more to go, of course. And, but, when you look at the sequence, the last 4 games after what they've accomplished, what they went through in the first 7, when we were staring at 3 and 4, it was kind of like, yeah, they got a shot, to go to a bowl game, but it wasn't like you felt like this is a stamp and it's automatic. I mean, the offense was so broken that you just didn't know. But I think they've gotten to the point now where at least the offense can do something. Even if they only have 146 yards against Wisconsin, at least they can punch it in when they get the ball in the red zone, when it comes there. Or in this case, hey, they only scored 13 points. Their best player was out from the first quarter on. And I'll give Brian Ferentz props. That first play of the game was money. That screen pass to Sam Laporta. But, they still came up with a way to win the game. They came up with the play. And it wasn't pretty. It hasn't been really pretty all year, but they did it. And now here they are, they're 7-4, and they're have an opportunity to go back to the Big Ten championship game. That says a lot about this team and its resiliency because, they very easily, I'm not saying they could have folded, and that's cliche, but they could have. They could have said, you know what, this isn't going anywhere, or get mad at each other and fist fight in the locker room, or F that guy, I can't believe he's starting, he sucks. None of it. That didn't leak out. None of it. They might have been mad at times, but they didn't show it. And here they are together. It's impressive. It's impressive for everybody who's with this program. And and I'm not blowing any smoke in any direction, and I'm not saying this as a kudos to Iowa type of thing, but you've got to be impressed with a team that was in that position, because the team that they're playing this week tends to go the other way. This team stuck together, won games, played tough. They defended the hell out of Charlie Jones. They went toe-to-toe with Wisconsin and won, and now they survived a cold winter blast and a great running back and pulled out another win. And now they just need to finish. And that's it. I'll say this, there are ways where it might not be easy. And then there are ways where, of course, it could be.
Yeah, and you consider, back in 2020 with the COVID, the racial bias.
Mm-hmm.
You look at this senior class and what it's been through, and what, if it wins on Friday, it will have accomplished after that. And who knows, that goofy 2000 season, they win their last 6 games. They've now won 14 games in a row in November.
Yeah.
You look at where the program was at that point, and many of us on the outside wondering how this would go. And now we're here looking at a potential second trip in a row to Indianapolis. And I think what is the coolest about this is Friday, I remember 2004 when they beat Wisconsin and there was the celebration at Kinnick Stadium and they brought the stage out and the trophy was there. You don't get a lot of those at home just because, they play on Friday. You got to wait till we'll see what happens on Saturday nowadays. But this is a great opportunity for this senior class to be honored before the game. And then if they win, to celebrate after the game. I think it's appropriate.
Absolutely. As you said, you look at this, take 3 steps back and look at this in totality. And the accomplishment of the players, the coaches too, they earn their right to celebrate any of this, and just everyone involved. Reese Morgan, by the way, is the honorary captain. That's kind of interesting. He's probably going to be there anyway. But
and my first year here in 1997, I've told this story before. Reese invited me to Thanksgiving at his house when he was the Iowa City West coach. I did not go. I went to a church and served meals and did that instead. But always appreciated Reese.
Fantastic guy, and they don't make anybody like him. He is the classic coach. When you think of coach, a great coach, it's him. And we could go on and on about him too. But we both wrote about it. We both had a lot of people, you more than I, not like what we wrote in 2020 with whether it's racial bias and then the COVID at the same time, the confluence, the 0-2 start to that season. It just felt like everything's collapsed. The regime is over. It's all gone. But whether it's Kirk Ferentz being able to humble himself, to make changes, personnel changes to his department, to allow some young men to feel more welcomed at Iowa, to when there are moments on the field, to be stubborn when he needs to, and times when we don't think he needs to be, but to punch through. Last year they were 6-0 and everything looked great. Then it didn't, but then they still found ways to win. This year it looked like a disaster through 7 games, and they were the laughing stock of college football. And they lost their best receiver, and another one left. And next thing you know, here they are on the precipice of second straight division title. And yes, it looks like it'll probably be a mismatch in Indianapolis, and maybe it will be. So what? The accomplishment to me is if they win and win decisively, especially on Friday, and they have a stage, they earn that right to accept it because they all did it together. And you see young men like Kayvon Merriweather and John Wagner and Lois Shannon and Spencer Petras and on, Sam Laporta, and everything they accomplished together after the trial and that they dealt with. It's impressive any way you look at it.
Yeah, no question. And I never really could wrap my mind around. I understand it to a degree, but I never wrap my mind around we don't want to win the division because we may get embarrassed in Indianapolis. To me, that's just a ridiculous perspective on it, because you go to Indianapolis, you're going to be a big underdog. Doesn't mean you can't compete. And last year was last year, and it didn't work out, and it was ugly. But maybe this team learns from that and figures out a way to hang, and who knows, spring a ridiculous, crazy upset. So That's my first thought on that. And my second thought on the senior day topic is, if anybody boos Spencer Petras when he's announced on Friday, you're an asshole. Mm-hmm. That's my take.
I agree. And I think on both points, I'm just thinking bullshit both ways. I mean, if they go to Indianapolis and lose decisively, who gives a shit? I mean, that they earned their right there. They earned it. They won it on the field when they needed to. And that's why players play and fans don't, and yes, you can say, oh man, this might be ugly, but so what? The players are the ones who play. The players are the ones who work their ass off, who, and when it was 6 degrees outside, got their ass to the weight facility and lifted at 6 a.m. and did all that stuff and all the training and all those videos you like to watch in the off season. And then, and then fought back from, a blitzkrieg at Columbus and, 7-3 when everything looked horrific in the opener. They do it for themselves. They don't have to answer to anybody else. And then likewise, any of these players deserve to be congratulated because they represent you. They represent the state of Iowa. They represent themselves and their families. And this is a moment that they need to treasure. And if you can't cheer them, be silent, but don't boo, because you're an asshole. You probably don't deserve what you got in life, because that's just, it's bad enough when you boo them during a bad performance, but if they haven't even played and you're booing them, get the F out of here. That you just don't deserve. You should go pick some other team to be a fan of.
Agree. Amen. Hop into a little bit of Nebraska here. I don't think we need to dissect it too heavy. I think the main question here, Scott, is where I listened to Mitch Sherman, your colleague at The Athletic, on the Todd Bromwell show with Alex Kuhn yesterday. And I thought Mitch, kind of capsulized it pretty well, that this isn't the same team that, even though it was 1-7 coming into this game last year, gave Iowa fits it sounded like he felt more like this Nebraska team is ready for it to end and move on to the next chapter of hiring a new head coach. It's different than it was last year. They knew Scott Frost was going to be back. As this week's gone on, Scott, I've started to feel a little bit more confident that Iowa's just in a much better position here than Nebraska. I'll beyond just the talent and how good they are as a team.
Yeah, and it's weird because you get into this position and you still look at Nebraska and you go, they've got some talent here. Why aren't they better? And last week they played hard with Wisconsin, and they've done this every year. You think, okay, this is going to be a coronation, and it turns out to be a slugfest to the bitter end. And yet, this year does not seem – I agree with Mitch. Doesn't seem to be the year where, hey, they're going to flex their rivalry muscles and it's going to be a 4-quarter war. Now, that's up to Iowa to ensure that doesn't happen. Don't turn the ball over early. Force them to punt right off the bat. Maybe get a sack, maybe get a strip sack, do something to make them go, all right, let's just get this thing over with. Forget it, and make it 40-10 like in 2016, rather than last year where you're throwing every karma chip on the table.
Yes.
It's let's get a safety. Okay, well, we'll pull from the 2024 total of karma for the safety or a blocked punt. Well, we know that one was good. They've got a couple of players that I think they're best suited at skill, and they got one outstanding pass rusher, and the rest of it's pretty paltry. I mean, I like their quarterback. I think Caleb Williams is a good quarterback, and this is probably it for him. Casey Thompson, I should say. I like Trey Palmer a lot. I think he's a receiver that you've got to be cognizant of him because, after the 200 yards against Purdue, I went, okay, this guy can play. Yeah. I think Anthony Grant's a good running back. And I think the best player they have for sure is Garrett Nelson, outside linebacker who can blitz, who can play everywhere. He's an NFL player. So, those are the guys that I look at. And Mathis was such a big offseason pickup for them from TCU. And he's just kind of been a guy. He's been okay. But when you look at their offensive line, you're like, this isn't anything you faced last week, even the week before. It wasn't a great Wisconsin line, but this isn't even in that ballpark. And their left tackle, was a 4-star, he's not. Let's just say you want to put Lucas Van Ness on him on a lot of passing situations.
I think we can probably say this with a degree of confidence, Scott, that the sum has never equaled the parts with Nebraska since back in 2015. They've had talent. It's in the NFL, skill position in particular. Not good up front for the most part on either side of the ball. And I think that's the biggest part of the problem at Nebraska. And I'm not close to it, so I don't have any expertise on it. But when I watch it, that's where it is. It's in the trenches. It's that almost a denial that you have to conform to the way football is played in the Big Ten West, which is physical, week in and week out in the trenches, who can win up front. For Nebraska, it better hope that it finds a coach and a coaching staff that can start to develop that and start to develop an identity. You can have your own identity, and we see it at different spots, whether it's Purdue or Illinois or Iowa or Wisconsin. These teams all have an identity right now. Nebraska hasn't had one for years. Iowa is where it is right now coming into this week because of its identity, because of knowing who it is. And Nebraska doesn't. And that's the biggest difference in this series, in this rivalry right now. So it's really incumbent on Nebraska to fix this thing. I just don't see this Nebraska team being able to beat this Iowa team as long as this Iowa team does not beat itself.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. The two problems that they've had since they've joined the Big Ten, let's be honest, is line of scrimmage play and development, period, as a program. And they don't want to look at themselves as a developmental program. And that's the reality of staring in the mirror and realizing who you are and what you are. And I think when you look at Iowa and Wisconsin, both of them particularly are the most self-aware programs in the country. They know what they are. They know what they can get, and they play to what they can recruit to. Now we can make complaints in any area, about their recruiting or how they do this and that. But they know who they are, and they're going to stick to that. Nebraska has never stared itself in the mirror and said, okay, this is who we are. I've told them a million times on Nebraska radio stations, look, you never have to strive to be Wisconsin or Iowa, but what you have to do is learn how do you play with them, because once you can line up in the line of scrimmage and go toe-to-toe with them on each and every play, offensive line, defensive line, then you can do whatever the hell you want, in the backfield. You can run zone read, you can run spread, you can run, Iowa's offense or Wisconsin's offense. It doesn't matter. You can do it all. But you have to be able to go and compete in the line of scrimmage. And they haven't ever been able to do that since they joined the Big Ten. They haven't been, I think a little bit of that on defense with Bo Pelini, but their skill position players overall, when Adrian Martinez was there, and they've had great receivers at times. I mean, Wan'Dale Robinson was terrific, and they had other ones. But then they transfer. Their attrition rate is gross. They bring in good players, and then they don't. Then they leave, or they don't develop enough. And that's one thing about Iowa and Wisconsin. I'll lump them both together. Is that a lot of times their athletes are not top shelf, but they push them and develop them and turn them into quality players. And Nebraska can't get there. And so now you look at that as the Frost failure. And it's a shame, because that program, that once proud program, that was a shot that I thought it was a guarantee that they'd at least be competitive, not that they were going to be worse as a program. And so now they've got to figure that out. And I think the best possibility for the Nebraska program is they could bring in a builder and somebody who's given some damn space, and whether it's our profession or just the environment around Nebraska, that sometimes they just cling to what they were and their history and tradition, which I understand, but so much that they just got to just give them some space, let them develop. Don't compare everybody to Tom Osborne. Don't compare this to, they're back. Let them build, because maybe their next coach is a guy like I'm just throwing his name out there, like Chris Kleiman, Matt Campbell, or somebody like that. They come in, they build it in a stair-step fashion, which is just get better every single day. Stupid cliches, but they get better every day. And then in year one, they compete. Year two, they start winning. And then they start playing the way they want to. But everybody just gets overreacts so damn much that it's just let it just calm down. But who am I, right? I'm just an Iowa guy. I just cover Iowa.
That's going to be a challenge too, Scott, that patience to build. Mm-hmm. That, somebody's not going to come in and go, boom, we're back in the 90s. We're winning 10 games a year. Boom. You need somebody to come in and break this thing down and build it back up and figure out this is how what Brett Bielema is doing at Illinois, what PJ Fleck has done at Minnesota, what Kirk Ferentz did 24 years ago in Iowa, Jeff Brom has been able to do at Purdue. Everybody's doing it different ways. Barry Alvarez at Wisconsin way back, and what that's continued to be, they've kept an identity even after Barry. It's just Nebraska needs to get over itself and just realize, hey, we need to figure out who we are, and because they've got the resources. Shit, their resources are coming out of their ears and elsewhere. But it's there. I mean, you get the right guy in there, it's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember talking to people, even comparing Matt Campbell at Iowa State versus Scott Frost or Mike Riley or whoever. Yeah. And, early on, there were a shit ton of excuses about, well, Frost has to deal with Riley's players and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, look at what Matt Campbell had to deal with at Iowa State. You think he had anything close to what Nebraska has any year? And yet in the second year, they're going to a bowl game. They're competing. They're beating Oklahoma. They're doing all these things. And yet, there's just this blind allegiance and, loyalty. And I get it. I do. But it's again, they're going to have to be a little bit more self-aware because they're going to have to be patient. They're going to have to do everything they don't want to do, but they're going to have to do in order to get back to where they can be. Because yes, as you said, they're fourth in revenue among the Big Ten teams. They have as much history and tradition as anybody. We know that, and most Iowa fans are sick of hearing about it. But none of that history has come when their players have been alive. They've been a decent program at times, and in other times they've been a horrific one like now. It's just a matter of take a step back, just move forward, because they do have the potential. Just, when you look at what Iowa and Wisconsin have done, there's no reason why Nebraska can't do it. But they also have to humble themselves enough to look at, as you said, Illinois, Purdue, Minnesota. What are they doing right? What is Nebraska doing wrong? I think Trev Alberts gets it. I think he understands. It's just a matter of will the other people around him and allow him and the new coach and the system to just kind of work, and I think for the most part they're in that, but the people relaying that message is going to have to relay it in a way that makes sense.
No doubt. Things are, I guess, if you're Nebraska, you probably look at where they are now, and it's rock bottom. Huskers are ranked 11th in the league in scoring offense at 22.5, 10th in total offense. And that has been its strength recently at 345.5 yards per game. Defensively, they are, let's see here. Nebraska checks in at 12th, giving up 28.5. And they are 13th in yards allowed amongst Big Ten teams at 427. So again, Scott, I don't think we need to continue to break this game down. This is pretty much, if Iowa plays well and up to its capability, it should win.
And it should be decisive because, as you said, look at the national figures. Iowa's offense, we all know those. So nobody's predicting an onslaught of points, maybe on the defensive side. But when you're talking about Nebraska right now is 101st in offense and 108th nationally in defense. They're 110th in turnover margin, which we know is a big number for Iowa. They're 19th.
How many sacks have they given up? They've given up a lot of sacks.
Yeah, I don't have that number.
It's 30. So I know it's over 30. And that's, I'm sure Lucas Van Ness and everybody's just like watching the film going, yeah, we may have a chance to do some damage Friday.
Well, exactly. They had 7 against Northwestern. Yeah. So I imagine that, and that was like the most in a Big Ten game since Northwestern of like 2000. So I imagine they're thinking, let's go for more than that. But in just about every major category, they are near the bottom on both sides of the line of scrimmage. At least with Iowa, their offense is not very good. Even when it's having a little bit of life, it's still not very good. But defensively, it's elite. To use a PJ Fleck term, and it finds ways to ruin your day. And this is the first time since 1929 that Iowa has allowed 10 or fewer points in 8 games. That's and really 9, counting the 13 points against Northwestern, which was on the last play of the game against the reserve. So it's just, I think there are people wondering in Lincoln, this is going to be a shutout. And I don't think they're that far off. The only thing that gives me pause about that is, one, predicting this shutout is kind of crazy. And 2, they do have big play capability. So what we've seen from Iowa a few times is that, they get a little bit, they blitz happy or something, or, like what Riley did against Wisconsin.
Yeah.
But, those 2 scoring drives, if you will, for Wisconsin were caused by a turnover and, a cornerback not playing his position correctly. And of course he got an interception later to make up for it. So I think this is, this has got 31-3 written all over it if Iowa plays its cards right.
Yeah, Nebraska kicker Timmy Bleekrode is 8 of 10 on field goals. So there's a chance if they can get close enough, they can get on the board, at least get that 3 and keep from getting skunked.
Yeah, we say that now, and then this will be the year where they, Iowa gives them enough life and they win 16-13 and, turn the rivalry into something that it should be or should have been for a long time.
Yeah, I don't want to think about doing a podcast next week if Iowa loses this football game. So let's not consider that. Wanted to let folks know that support for this podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That's Systems Unlimited. We thank them very much for their support and the rest of our sponsors as well. We're going to hear from a few of them now, and Scott will be back. Scott and I will be back on the other side to talk a little bit more football, touch on some basketball, and then get out of here for Thanksgiving. And we are back. Thank you to our sponsors. We appreciate it a lot. Those watching us on YouTube are like, what are those guys just doing? They're not saying anything, but that's part of this, how we make the sausage. You can see how we make the sausage here. Scott, you put together a piece yesterday with some interesting, this has been in honor of the Grateful Dead. What a long, strange trip it's been. And I use that in my column from Saturday. It's just been, this is kind of just a wild season. It's fun when things like this happen, unexpected, fighting back, resilience, all of that stuff. So there have to be some numbers and some statistics and some metrics that help to tell this story. And you wrote about that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's I started going through some of these numbers, and there's just so many astounding things to this program over the last year. This season, I guess if you could say, they haven't been great, but man, they've been interesting. And I guess if that's the one thing you look for as a journalist is, if you can't be good, at least be interesting. So
and entertaining. We want entertainment from our sports. If you haven't been entertained this year, you don't have a pulse.
Exactly. So, so I did 25 facts / numbers about the Iowa season thus far, and some things that I think are interesting, and it kind of encompasses everything. And I don't mind going through them all. It's on my one of my posts today, and you got a $1 a month offer right now. So go to the Athletic.
Take advantage of that, folks, at the Athletic. That's a great value. You get everything across the board in the company. I use it for fantasy football and baseball. I get to, my misery of following the Mets and the Jets and the Knicks and the Islanders. I get to live that through the Athletic. So yeah, great. Check out this story that Scott's talking about and everything he's got, and then you get a lot of extras.
Yeah. And the first thing is, this is Ferentz's 300th game coaching at Iowa. And that he's 185 and 114 at the Hawkeyes. And he's won 197 games overall. So if you think about it, 200's right around the corner, whether it's, he has a miraculous win, wins this week, something incredible in Indianapolis, and then something just as incredible in the Rose Bowl. I'm not predicting any of that, but I'm just saying that it could come against Iowa State, say, next year. That would be interesting. With 115 Big Ten only wins, Ferentz is tied for third all time in Big Ten history with Amos Alonzo Stagg, and only Woody and Bo have more than he does. That's unbelievable. I mean, really, you think about the great coaches in this league, and I'm not suggesting that somebody who has fewer wins is worse or whatever, but that's a lot of wins for Kirk Ferentz, and Hayden Fry's fifth with 96. So, he could be 20 wins in the Big Ten ahead of Hayden, if he wins on Friday.
Yeah, 2 in the top 5 from one school is pretty impressive.
Exactly. Yeah. One other point, they've won 14 November games in a row. This is money season, And
if Nate Stanley would have just gotten across the goal line, it would be 17 in a row.
yeah, exactly. And if the umpire wouldn't have gotten in the way of Mekhi Sargent in his block, then he probably would have. I mean, and who knows? Maybe Wisconsin went right down the field after that.
Yeah.
But the play calling would have been different in a tie game versus a lead, because in the lead, then they could just say, we're just going to run the ball. And they did. In a tie game, well, they better throw the ball. And maybe they don't. Maybe Iowa pulls that out. They've also won 10 consecutive games played on Fridays. 7 straight against Nebraska, of course. But the others include Maryland last year, 2020 at Minnesota, leave the timeouts.
That's right. That was a Friday game.
Take Floyd, it's the, leave the gun, take the cannolis of Kirk Ferentz. And then the Holiday Bowl against USC. So that was pretty fascinating. The game that never ended, it seemed, the Nevada game, 2:36 and 3 weather delays of minutes. It started at 6:40 on September 17th and ended at 1:39 a.m. on September 18th, which just happened to be my birthday. I left the press box.
I think that game will have its own chapter in the story of the 2022 season. There's there was plenty of time to come up with storylines.
Yes, and that was. It got really old, and and being an old dude myself, it was just like, oh man, I don't know how much more of this, how long I could take, because I got to, you got to write after the fact, and it's like, I'm not just, so yeah, it was like 2:30 in the morning when, Ferentz finally was done with his press conference, and it was like, man, this is something else, but. The kickoff temperature was 17 at the Iowa-Minnesota game, the second coldest air temperature for a college game at Huntington Bank Stadium. I always make that distinction because I remember the Minnesota-Seattle playoff game about 10 years ago was, oh my God, that was like -9 or something like that. But the wind chill dipped into -1, and that game was colder than any game ever at Kinnick Stadium. So, which was -8 or was 18.
Let's hope that record is not broken until I retire.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to see it anymore. No way. I think the Kayvon, who as always has something fun to say. Somebody asked him after the game on Saturday about the cold, and it was all right. What about playing it again? Let's never do that again.
And he's from Michigan.
Yeah, I know. So I don't think anybody likes that kind of weather. I don't think Eskimos like that weather. As I mentioned earlier, the first time since 1929, Iowa's allowed 10 points or fewer in 8 games. That's just remarkable.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. Then there were some early ones, like holding up their first 3 opponents to 151 yards or less. The first time since '86 that was the case, that teams had less than 160 yards in each of the first 3 games. Of course, they were 2-1. That doesn't go real well, especially with the loss to who it came to. Iowa's 8-game winning streak against Minnesota is the longest in the 116-game history between the two teams. And Iowa leads the overall battle with Floyd, 44, 42, and 2. So, the last 2 years, that's been Iowa's taking the lead for the first time ever. That's incredible. The game the other day, by the way, I'm sure we all knew, found out at the end of the game when I asked one of our editors, was no penalties for the first time since 1986. There were plenty of penalties committed, but there were none.
There always are.
Yes.
I think the officials felt the cold too, and they're like, nah, I'm going to let that one go. Let's get the hell out of here.
Yeah, exactly. There was a lot of times when Minnesota was collapsing the line and there was like a cut, and all of a sudden there was a, Jack Campbell or Seth Benson in particular, those two were deterred from getting to him, and what are you going to do, So, as I said, Clinton Jones was the last Big Ten running back since 1966. He had 268 yards to have more than Mo Ibrahim.
That was a year before I was born. And if you're looking at me on YouTube right now, you know that was a long time ago.
Yeah, me too. We're looking at get close to 60 years. 56 years the last time somebody had more yards in a Big Ten game than Mo Ibrahim against Iowa. The 7-3 game was the first time since 2004, the Penn State game, where a Big Ten team won without a touchdown. And then it was also the first time since at least 2000, and I don't know when, that somebody had 2 safeties and a field goal and that they'd scored only 7 points in that manner. The Michigan win was the first time Iowa had lost under Brian Ferentz as offensive coordinator without committing a turnover. That's kind of fascinating. The Ohio State 54-point game performance was the most by an opponent since that Eddie George Orlando Pace team of 95 put up on Iowa, and the most that was put up against Ferentz. And what's interesting, I remember that game vividly in 95. I was in college, and it was 56-0 at halftime.
Yeah.
And it was 56-35 at game's end. So it looks like it's a shootout or something, but we know that that's not the case. Caleb Johnson's 200 yards was the most since Akram had 204 against Northwestern and 15. Laporta's 146 catches are first among tight ends, and same thing with receiving yards. 1,730. Of course, he won't be playing this week, which I think is a factor. I think it's something.
It sucks. I feel bad for him. Feel awful for him.
Right. I mean, every year there's like a guy. Jack Kerner was last year. There's always a senior that.
Matt Hankins was out too last year.
Yeah.
I remember seeing him walk around the field before the game to kind of soak it in, but I could tell he was missing out on something.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the worst feeling if you're them. So now we get into some negative ones a little bit for the offense, and there are some. I was thinking about it, and I'm like, you know what? I got to include this because it's not been a ray of sunshine in every quarter of Iowa's football season. And 146 yards against Wisconsin were the fewest in an Iowa victory since 1947 against Minnesota. The 17.5 points per game is the lowest since 2000, which was a rough year for Iowa, as we know. The average yards per game, 253.7, is the lowest for Iowa since 78, the year before Hayden Fry became head coach. But that's way up from where it was after the Ohio State game, which was 227.3. But they're still on pace to have the worst full season Big Ten offensive average since Ferentz took over in 99. The 17 Rutgers squad was the worst at 262.7. Ugh, that's not good.
Yeah, that is ugly. Sorry about the dog.
No, the dog got it too, man. He's like, it's a dog day off. So just to get it out of the regular season past that, it needs 365 yards against Nebraska.
It's possible.
Yeah, it's possible. 2 more, and this is special teams related. Torrey Taylor has dropped 16 punts inside the 10-yard line, 13 inside the 6-yard line.
Wow.
But that doesn't make him a semifinalist. Or
who the hell is voting for that award?
Well, I'm a voter, but I'm not I actually asked, I said, what's the criteria why he wasn't part of it? And I didn't get a response. So yeah, that's insane. I mean, that's just not paying attention to the sport. Basically what you're doing is looking at average, and that's it.
Yeah.
Because he's 13th in average. Well, he's trying to park, 13 punts inside the 6-yard line. The NFL will notice, and he'll be the first punter selected by an NFL team next year. But let's not give him the Ray Guy Award. And I think part of it is probably what he said back in September. But still,
yeah, if they're that thin-skinned, heck with them.
Yeah, exactly. Crimea River. And finally, and this goes to a point where something you discussed a little earlier, Rob, is Drew Stevens has hit 15 field goals, which is the most for a freshman in program history. And he's only done it in 17 attempts. So I think that has shown that was one of the big question marks going into the season. And the question has been answered with emphasis. He's done a really nice job because he's kicked field goals in some bad weather environments, whether it's like Purdue, where they're the wind is swirling, or the cold the other day, and he's a kid from South Carolina. It's just he's done it. He's done a nice job, and I know that there's some people giving him, his dad went on Twitter and said something about a scholarship and giving him some grief there. He's earned it. Give it to him. He's had an
If you don't, somebody else will.
And that is true. And you don't think that somebody's not going, oh God, this kid's from the South and he's doing that in Iowa. So I would give him the scholarship. Do it in the locker room like he did for Keith Duncan all those years
ago. Yep. Yeah,
so
no question.
So yeah, there's I don't know if I might have skipped over one or two, but I did the 25 facts and figures to go along with kind of the impact of Sam Laporta's absence and what they're going to have to do to replace him, and then also the marquee recruit of the year and what Xavier Wampa had to say about it.
Yeah, definitely. I wrote about Xavier today for Hawk Fanatic, and just really impressed with that kid. Not that I was surprised because I got to know him in recruiting, but just he's a good fit for this program because he didn't come in here expecting anything, and he's working for what he's going to get. And he's got a great attitude, and he's contributing on special teams, and he's doing what he can while also remaining a friend to Caden Proctor and letting Caden make his decision for himself and go through the process. But I thought he had good things to say about that. And we'll see how it plays out. We'll see if Caden's here on Friday. I haven't heard one way or the other on that. Caden's kind of he's gone off the grid a little bit in terms of his recruitment and talking about that, which is perfectly fine. He and his family for the next month should have their privacy and let them go through the process.
Right. We got 4 weeks now till signing day, and it makes sense. There are a lot of opinions here, and the ones that are local, the ones we noticed, the most. There's a lot of fear and anxiety over this, and that's understandable. And I think you just let him make the best decision for him. And it might be your program, it might not be your program. I know some people are wondering about parental involvement. I will say that when you start to go with any parent who has not an athlete, just a young person who has a special skill, you want to see him realize and enhance that gift and be compensated for it. And with NIL now, there's no bag it. There's no, hey, under the table, here you go. It's all above table. And I think what you do is you just say, you got to exercise, your best judgment. And I know Iowa has put the second most first rounders in the NFL since Kirk Ferentz has been there, but Oregon's got some pretty good players in its history too, and Penei Sewell at all among the offensive linemen, especially. So he's got to do his best judgment. I think, what Iowa needs to do, and I would strongly recommend Iowa doing, if it hasn't done it already, is leverage its relationship with Nike. Nike is an Oregon school, but I think Iowa's had a long-standing relationship with Nike too, and the Tiger Hawk is synonymous with college athletics. And I would say, look, he could be a Nike athlete for you in the middle of the country. And, don't go against some of your best interests either, because they could obviously be an Adidas school very quickly if they use. So I think that's something that I would encourage, Iowa to do in a constructive way. And ultimately, I mean, I asked Xavier, because one of the questions we all kind of assume, but I'm like, can he play right away? Is he good enough? He's like, oh yeah, he's good enough. He's good enough. So, and and if you're Iowa, could he be the first true freshman to start opening day? Yeah, I think so. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Watched him in both the semifinals and finals, leading Southeast Polk to its second consecutive big school Class 5A title. And I think the kid played defensive tackle in college. He's very athletic. He moves really well. I don't know as he's been challenged at a high level in high school. There were a few kids that he just kind of throws at. It's like swatting a fly away for him.
Yeah.
And obviously, and I think Xavier said this to you, it's, he needs to tighten up the technical details of the position, which wherever you go, think about, the coaching you'll get and, maximizing the natural talent. And Scott and I talked about this a lot last week. If you want to listen to last week's podcast, we dove into this a lot deeper, just about Iowa and NIL and our thoughts on that. And there's no need to go over that again. But ultimately, it's a lifelong decision, but it's also a now decision now with NIL. And, on the one hand, it's Iowa's success in producing first-round NFL picks, but there are no guarantees in life, and there are injuries in life and things like that. It's not an easy decision, and it's a 17, 18-year-old kid. Don't get on his parents either for helping him make the best choice for him, and at least what they think. Nobody knows for sure what the future holds. You're making the best decision based on the information you have right now.
Right. And yes, it's, I would say based on what we think of Caden Proctor right now, that the likelihood is he has enough natural ability. And if you couple that with a work ethic, good training, good development, that I think he's probably a 3-year guy wherever he goes. And then he's probably off to the NFL and maybe a first-round draft pick. And then that means that his NIL money today is dwarfed. But you can't always think that way, because injuries happen. What if he busts? Things like that. Then you've got to, or what if he's good, but maybe not great? Let's look at somebody like Alaric Jackson, who I thought was draftable and had a couple of things that didn't work out for him in his favor, and he was an undrafted free agent. Now he's been a starter, but that's still not the same as getting NIL money up front. So I think there's that, but he's also close to home. He has friends on the team. You can't buy those types of relationships, the ability to have your parents come to your games, come over when you want to just see them and say hi, and have friends on your team who can do the same thing and cheer for you. And so there's all kinds of factors here. And I don't think it's, pressuring him is not the right thing to do. So, I do think that if he picks Iowa, that day one, hey, in January, he's going to go through the grueling routine of weight training. And I think that's going to be really good for him. And he's going to go through a really rough spring too, Rob, because if he's going to go against Lucas Van Ness, he's not going to take it easy on him. In fact, if anything, he's going to go harder on him. And that's going to be good for him, because he'll learn very quickly what good technique does, because it's not going to, Lucas Van Ness is going to be an NFL starter and probably a Pro Bowl player at some point. So if he's there and going against you in drills, you're going to get embarrassed. You're going to get embarrassed a lot, and you just deal with it. Or YA Black, or, any kind of those drills are going to be very helpful for him. And so by year 2, year 3, he's going to be a starter based on his losses in practice.
And Oregon, Alabama, Georgia, any other school that he would go to, he's going to face some really high level talent in practice. It's just a matter of finding the right fit for you. And then there are factors now, as we've just talked about, that are beyond football, and it's financial. And I wish him the best in making a decision. I've gotten to know him during recruiting, super kid like Xavier. And we'll see. I hope I get the chance to cover him, but if I don't, I wish him the best no matter where he goes, because I think he's a good kid. So let's hit a little hoops. Did we hit everything on football? I think we did. We'll talk more recruiting and who's going to the NFL and all that other stuff. We'll have plenty of time in December to hit upon that. I know you didn't get a chance to watch the men on Monday. I did not get a chance to watch the women's game against Belmont on Sunday. I was at my daughter's basketball tournament, so didn't get the chance to see that, so I won't. Good news though, Scott, Caitlin Clark avoided missing any time, got back. Ankle's a little tender, but she scored 30 points on a bad ankle. She could probably score 30 points like on one leg because that's how good she is. But the women drop out of the top 10. Tough game, tough loss at Kansas State. Was that Thursday last week? I think that may have been before we potted before that. So hadn't talked about that, but lost a tough one. Kansas State, when she got dinged up, came back, beat a tough Belmont team at home. Iowa women will head out to Portland in the Phil Knight, whatever it is, classic, challenge, whatever tag they have on it, but play Oregon State, I believe, tomorrow night. I think the men play, Friday night. That would be November the 25th. So you got Iowa football, Scott, at 3. Then men's basketball, I think, starts at 6 against Clemson. They are in Destin, Florida at the, Del Boca Vista, Frank Costanza Open or whatever that thing is called. It's that time. I've been watching the Maui thing. But I'm just rambling on here. We've got basketball. Chris Murray's really good. Caitlin Clark's really good. Wrestling is at home on Tuesday against Penn, which is ranked. It's Iowa wrestling is really good. What do you want to say about the winter sports?
Man, the confluence of this already makes me tired thinking about it. But this is what November is usually all about. And I think first of all, we're bringing up the women's team, and it's not a bad scenario for them to get kind of hip checked early this year, because they are going to be one of the best teams in the country. I think in some ways to get tested this early against some pretty good teams, and teams maybe you didn't expect to be good, like a Drake and Belmont. I think
Drake ended up coming back and beating Nebraska, which was ranked.
Right. So I think playing these games is going to be very helpful for them, because they've got one of the toughest, if not the toughest, Big Ten schedule. And playing pretty much what they did was say, let's get all the best teams playing each other as often as possible. And so Caitlin Clark, as we know, is going to have, then they've also got to play Iowa State coming up and NC State coming up. And then this, the NIL Classic.
That's a good name for it. Yep.
Yeah.
Show me the money Classic.
Exactly.
Bags are us.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe they can, convince Phil there to come back with an Iowa for a game.
Potential game against UConn on Saturday or Sunday. It's like it's Sunday.
Exactly. So this is all great stuff for Iowa. And no matter if they win or lose, it's not really going to matter, because they're good enough to overcome it. It's going to make them tougher. It's going to make them, they're going to have some really good games. And then with wrestling and at this point, I'm just kind of waiting to see them get to the Big Ten, and then I'll start to really evaluate what they do. Probably after football season is when I'll pay attention to that. Men's basketball is fascinating going, again at the arena in Niceville, Florida. As you said, the Seinfelds, I think the parents are Jerry's parents live there at that resort, and hopefully they don't run into all the problems that they've had there at the resort. I was watching that episode a few months ago.
Jack Clumpus.
Yeah, the sleep deprived people there, but no, nice tournament. It's good for them that they get that they potentially can see Andrew Francis on Saturday. He's one of my favorite assistants I've covered. Rob, you were at the game Monday. We saw the tweet from Connor McCaffrey about the crowd. I've got some opinions on this. I'll let you start and then shoot it back to me, and then I'll kind of relay what I think about that.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for as long as I can remember, Scott. Men's basketball attendance, it's beyond beaten to death. It doesn't mean it shouldn't be discussed and analyzed and addressed. It doesn't get addressed. I don't know why. I should say this, it's addressed, but not effectively. And there needs to be, I think I showed up for, forget what game earlier this season, but they had pizza for the student section, boxes of pizza stacked up. That's a start. Do some things to get people in the arena. It's tough this time of year for families. It's not a cheap venture to get to. Weekday nights, things like that. Do things to help boost. It was bad Monday, Scott. It was as bad as I can remember in terms of people actually in the seats. So I get where Connor was coming from, and he recognizes that they have some important home games coming up. Georgia Tech, Iowa State. I think there's a Big Ten game shoehorned in there somewhere. Wisconsin, maybe? Yeah. I mean, those are important games that are help build a resume. And it's important to have a home crowd in college basketball, in every sport, but college basketball really can help you out. And I'm exhausted from talking about this, and I don't understand why smart minds, smart marketing people can't figure this out.
Here's the problem. I think it's holistic with the sport as much as it is an Iowa problem, because this isn't unique to Iowa anymore. And I think the schedule creep that has taken place in college basketball over the last 20, 30 years is really doing a disservice to the players on the floor. And when you start your damn season November 7th and you're not playing anybody that's interesting at all, these are the results you're going to get. And you're going to do it on a Monday night. I think Monday night might be the worst night of the week to do this, especially in a holiday week. When you have football still ongoing. If you were to do this on the Thursday before it, Thanksgiving Classic, or even the Wednesday, and granted, they're going out of town, so it can't happen.
And this was part of that thing that they're in this weekend.
Right.
I think Omaha goes to this, is playing in this thing as well. And that's just, you're right though. That speaks to what you're describing, just the wonkiness of early season college basketball.
They played on Wednesday. The next game is a Monday night at home. Why didn't you play this on Saturday or Sunday? You're probably going to get a better crowd. You will get a better crowd. I don't know. I haven't asked that question. I'm not going to. I have too many other questions to ask about too many other topics. But I do wonder, was there a reason why you had to wait that long before that happened? It's during when the students are already gone. Maybe they're still in town if you play it on Saturday or even Sunday afternoon when and I don't like to use those excuses about people working or that's why they can't make it to the 6 o'clock game, because they're not off work, and 8 o'clock's too late because they got to work the next day. I know we're an earnest and hardworking state, but that sometimes goes in the other direction. I just think that Monday night is never a good night because it is kind of the kickoff to the week. And if you're playing an opponent that doesn't interest anybody, it's going to be hard to get people there. They're just, I have season tickets to the women's team. We can't make it to every game either. And the earlier you start this season, the more it conflicts with football and the more it conflicts with other activities. Basketball has not been the sport that people will move heaven and earth to go attend. And when you're playing Omaha, not Nebraska, but Omaha, it's going to be very difficult. Now, next week with Georgia Tech, and it's a Tuesday night, students are back, you're going to see a significant bump in attendance. Iowa State, you'll see a full attendance. Wisconsin, you should see pretty close to that too. But I think that right now, you're right about Iowa. They have to start examining this, and I know that they've talked about it, but the marketing department is failing. They've got to figure out ways. Hey, this is going to be a challenged Monday night game. People aren't in town. What can we do differently? Hell, maybe even move it away from Carver Hawkeye. Make it into a Des Moines game. Make it a Cedar Rapids game. Make it a Coralville game. Do something different than just, we're just going to play in our home environment and put out a sign that says game today and list 9,000 people being there when we know that 7,000 of them are no-shows. So I think it's holistic. I think it's a basketball problem. I think it's an Iowa problem. I think it's a night problem. I think it's, if you're not going to play good teams at home problem. There's just everything. I don't know. What do you think, Rob? Am I off base?
No, I don't think you're off base at all. And I think, I don't want to, I want to at least clarify and say this isn't all on marketing at Iowa. It's Scott brings up really good points about the sport as a whole, but you can't fix what's going on elsewhere. You can address what's going on here and what's unique to your situation and try to help build a fan base, because we see in football, again, it's apples and oranges. It's once a week. It's 12, 7 games a year at home. It's that obviously strengthens that product. Plus it's football. But with college basketball, you need to find ways to build a fan base, young up. That way you're building, like Scott and I were saying, we've been talking about this for decades, literally. Mm-hmm. So for decades now, they have not built a fan base of people that maybe when they were 10 or 12 or 15, get into the habit of going to Iowa basketball games, go to school, get a job here, and then continue to go to Iowa basketball games. There seems to be a lack of a fan base for Iowa basketball. I want to make it clear that there are people that I see there on a regular basis. There is a base. It's just not big enough.
Mm-hmm. And that's why they've got to entertain this humongous question. And for years they should have done it in off season. They haven't done it, or if they have, they've only taken nibbles at the apple instead of one giant bite. And that is, what do you do about it? Other than, we'll just do what we always do. And I think that's, do you make the arena smaller? Do you change the arena? Do you have ushers walking up and down the aisles? To me, that makes sense, because do you have bathrooms where people don't have to walk 50 steps to go to the bathroom, to go get a concession, stuff like that. I think that's the fan-friendly environment. I did a survey during the off season, and that was part of the big thing with Carver Hawkeye Arena. It was just,
accessibility to things.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that, the one unique part about this for Iowa, more so than any other place, is that there are groups of fans, understandably so, who just want to sit and watch the game and cheer. And then there are fans who want to stand up and get loud and get vocal. And they're mixed. And maybe, again, this is unique to Iowa, that maybe they need to have areas and redo the arena to say, hey, if you want to sit and watch the game, we love you, have you here. We'll have you over here, and cheer when you want to, stand up when you want to. But this is kind of that area, and whether it's the older folks or whatever, that's fine. Because a lot of times I don't want to get up and cheer if I'm at an event. But, the fact is, but you got to have areas where you can have a rabid fan base too, because we've seen it, we've heard it too many times of examples of, people standing up and cheering after a dunk or something, and then fans sitting right behind them going, "Come on, man, I'm trying to watch the game." So that needs to be adjusted. Maybe a standing room only section. So all those things need to be discussed, and if they have been, they haven't been enough. And so I understand the frustration. I also think that if I'm the czar of college basketball, I don't allow for a game until maybe starting the Thursday before Thanksgiving, a week in advance. Because I just think that when you're watering down your product by allowing these games, these Tuesday Champions Classic games in Chicago, that they, have the people watching the games for the most part are watching them because they want to see the playoff rankings in the middle. So I don't think they're doing your sport any favors. So when I need to look this up, but I kind of wonder if some of the ESPN2 and ESPNU Maction games outrate them. So do your sport a favor. Give it that opening day feel. To maybe it's the Friday before Thanksgiving, and say, hey, at midnight is when it tips off, midnight Eastern. And so then on the West Coast, you could have midnight hoops or, midnight magic and all that kind of stuff. I think that would be much better served for the sport than starting November 7th against Bethune-Cookman in Iowa City.
And I think at this point, we've done this dance long enough. Put the students down on the court. Let them make a student section at Iowa that is, and so you're having to give up prime seats for your donors. That you have to do something to try to build this up. That's where I start. I move the students around the court, make it a true home court advantage there. And then, if the donors can't deal with that, they can't deal with it. You'll be all right. There's a crap load of TV money coming in.
Right.
So just do that. And then for Christ's sake, can you buy a couple more soft serve ice cream machines so people aren't standing in line for 2 hours to get the Carver ice cream? Why? To me, that's bizarre.
There is so much bizarre with this. And this is what's frustrating is that, yes, you go up there and you see 60 people standing in line for ice cream. There's a demand for it. Then give it to them. Have another one somewhere. Maybe you have two somewhere.
How much could one of those machines cost?
Right. And build a couple of bathrooms that older people, heavier people, normal people can access during a game.
Lazy people?
Yes. Journalists, goddamn it.
Exactly.
That we don't want to
the same people.
Yeah, exactly. We qualify. But there's like 2 bathrooms down and you see it at halftime and there's a line 50 deep. And it's like, and then you look at the end of the game when we're fighting through to get to the interview room, we're fighting through all of these fans trying to get to the one elevator.
I know.
And it's like, do yourself a favor. Make it easier on yourself. Do it as far as what's the environment like here. And we go through this all the time. During the summers, we talk about it. We've talked about it when Licklider was there, probably the end of the Alford era, and certainly throughout the Fran era. And I feel bad for them because they and somebody put out a product that people want to. No, shut the F up. They have a product that's worth it. They're a good team. This is a good program. They've won games. They have great players. They have All-American players. They have All-American players on their damn roster this year. So if you're going to complain about the product, just don't even watch basketball because you don't know what the hell you're talking about. But I think that the whole thing needs a reevaluation and from the top because and they're going to get good crowds for Iowa State and Wisconsin, but they're not going to for SEMO and Eastern Illinois. It's just, but you got to figure some things out, and then the scheduling aspect too is, will it really hurt you if maybe you do instead of playing, Omaha, you play Creighton, or even if you got to go on the road, because they've played these games, Cincinnati in the United Center, they played out in South Dakota at Sioux Falls. Now they're going to play Duke in New York City. Great games, but you're not doing anything for your fans who are actually paying for it. So maybe do some of that once in a while too. Don't be afraid. So
it's a shorter trip to Cedar Falls or Des Moines than it is to South Dakota or Chicago for, and to me, Scott, since playing Cincinnati is great, playing Clemson, playing high major programs is great, but, and I'm not going to beat this because it's another dead horse, but the in-state rivalries, I miss them. I miss going to the McLeod Center previously, before that, the Dome or to the Knapp Center. Those were fun environments. And I think the fans lose out, and I think the players lose out. I think the players would be more excited to play against a UNI or Drake than they would to play Clemson or Cincinnati.
Oh, for sure. It's fun to play in these environments, but you play 20 Big Ten games anyway. You're going to play in great environments for a long time, and that's fine. I think that's great. In fact, that I'm fine with the 20 games, but instead of playing, going to the United Center and playing Cincinnati, again, quality opponent, great arena. You're going to get a better experience as a college student going to those other two venues where you're going to be a legitimate road team that people don't like, that people root against you. And it's going to be the equivalent of going to the Kohl Center or Breslin Center or whatever. And those are games people look, like you and I, especially. First of all, they had a lot of success against Iowa, but also those are players that a lot of Iowa players play against in high school, in AAU, or play with, and so they're friends, and then they can be very competitive games. And Drake, you're playing in the state capital, and there's sometimes I think Iowa has lost some of the battle of the state capital to Iowa State, and they've ceded that ground. And the way you make it up is you entertain people in that area when you can. And so whether it's playing Drake, I don't think that would be I don't think that'd be a problem at all to get Drake back on the schedule. Play, even if it's hey, we'll play you, but we'll play you at Wells Fargo. Do it. There's no problem with that. And, play home and home, something like that. And Iowa State's got equal responsibility, I think, too, but I understand. The UNI thing was, they got pretty screwed in that one, but so what? It happens.
So concludes our latest edition of What's Going On at Carver Hawkeye Arena. It's a long-running program now, going on decades, and it won't end. It will not end with this conversation. We will be back talking about this again in the future. We just will.
Right.
It's
right.
Until it's addressed and fixed. And I don't know if it can be fixed, but it can be improved. And that's really what you're trying to do here is improve it.
Yeah, exactly. Just wait until there'll be a snow game at some point, Rob. Rutgers on BTN on January 29th.
Yep.
That there'll be snow in the area or whatever, and fans will be like, I don't want to risk it. And then it's like, well, let students in for free. Well, no, football makes all your money. The Big Ten is making a ton of money. Now it's time to feed your other beast, because it really doesn't financially. It's tread water for the last 20 years.
Yes. I guess that'll do it for this podcast. We've run long enough here and gotten to everything we want to get to. And Scott and I are gonna.
What about our picks?
Oh, the picks! Oh, how could I forget the picks?
I think you were trying to.
Yeah, I tried. Can't blame me for trying, because my picks suck.
Yeah, you were 2-5 last week. After having a great 6-1 week the week before, and a 4-3 week the week before that. This time around, you were 2-5. I wasn't much better. I was 3-4. We both got Iowa right and Penn State right, but we missed out. The split for us was you took Michigan -18. I took Illinois. But either way, we're going into the final weekend. And then I guess after this, we'll just have the championship and bowl games. So I used Bet Rivers points, the spreads here. I think that makes sense. And I think we'll start with the best friends of Iowa's program, Minnesota at Wisconsin, Badgers -3, Bob.
This one's tough because, again, kind of phone booth football, just pounding the ball at each other. Man, that's tough. I'm gonna throw the points with Wisconsin. Home, senior day, emotional, want Jim Leonard to be the head coach, go out on the high note for that. Maybe he's named before they play, and that boosts it as well. But I'm gonna go with Wisconsin.
I am as well. I think this is going to be pretty much what we saw this last weekend in Minneapolis. And I think I wouldn't be surprised, because it's a 3 that it ends up being our second draw of the year. But I could see it being a 3-point game. I could see it going to overtime. I could see it, last second field goal, something like that. But I am going to go with the Badgers as well. I just think it's probably for all the reasons you do. I wouldn't be surprised if we see it Friday. Maybe they try to do it right at the same time the Iowa and Nebraska game starts. Oh, by the way, Wisconsin just named him as head coach just to try to upstage or something.
Yeah.
But second game, and this is the biggest and most important rivalry game of the weekend: Rutgers at Maryland.
Throw the records out the window. Really?
Yeah.
No, throw them out the window.
Yeah, throw them out. Maryland is -14 in this one, Rob, and I'm going to go with Rutgers.
Where is it?
It's at Maryland, but that doesn't really matter.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't matter if it was at Rutgers either, for that matter.
No, it doesn't.
I think Maryland will win the game, but I think Rutgers will give me the 14. They're a physically tough team. They're not going to a bowl game. Maryland is. I think Shiana will have them ready to fight. If maybe not win, but fight. So I'm going to go with Rutgers, and that'll be my last word of the Rutgers Scarlet Knights football team this year.
I am with you. I'm going to take those points. That's too many in a game that is just not very attractive, with two teams that are woefully inconsistent. And it's a rivalry game, like we talked about. It's a huge rivalry game. That's too many points.
Yeah, well, the rest of them are, at least. So Purdue -11 at Indiana. This is kind of a fascinating game to me because Indiana did upset Michigan State last week and probably knocked them out of a bowl in doing it. There has been some discussion. I've had some DMs. Hey, what's your look at at Indiana's bowl hopes? Because I do the bowl projections for us, and I talk to bowl people, and I said it's not really existent right now because even if they win, they're 5-7, and their APR is too low. Iowa State actually would have been in really good position had they won last week, but I don't see them beating TCU to put themselves in that position this week. But I digress. I think Purdue probably covers on this. I think Indiana is, for whatever they did last week, I think they exhausted all their karma, and I think Purdue's got a chance, even though they didn't play very well against Northwestern. I think they play well against and retain the bucket, and I'll throw the 11 on that.
I'm with you. I'm going to throw the 11. Purdue is confounding. I watched some of that game. They just hurt themselves so much. They've done it throughout going back to the Penn State and Syracuse games at the beginning of the year. They just shoot themselves in the foot. Not that, that was the reason they lost to Iowa, but just mistakes, undisciplined things. Having said that, I'm not give Indiana credit for beating Michigan State last week. But I don't believe the Hoosiers are a very good football team. And I think Indiana lost to Nebraska, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. I'll take Purdue in the points.
Yeah, I'm there with you. I just think this is a way for Purdue to kind of, they don't have anything. Here's what they do have to play for, even if Iowa wins, that if they win, that they earn a share of the West Division title. They get a trophy. They don't, get to go to Indianapolis. They don't really get a gloat or anything like that, but they get a trophy. And I think that's something that, hey, it's an accomplishment. They didn't win the head-to-head. They did against Illinois. They did against Minnesota, but they didn't against Iowa. But it's still, I think it's something that they can celebrate. Illinois -14 at Northwestern, which the at part of it is questionable. I like Illinois -14. I think they played really hard against Michigan, came up short. They're pissed off. They've lost some games they shouldn't have lost, but I think this is their moment to say, okay, we're going to go out and seal club our supposed rival in Northwestern on the road. Northwestern's had a bad year. They played hard last week, but I'll throw the 14 and go with the Fighting Illini.
Yeah, I'm with you. Northwestern is just not good, particularly on offense. I think it was down to its third string quarterback last week. Just really no juice at all on that side of the ball. I think Illinois is better on the trenches on both sides of the ball. I think Chase Brown probably goes for a big game here. And I think Illinois is still very much engaged. We saw that last week against Michigan, even though it struggled down the stretch. And I think it covers.
Yeah, I do. I think that could be the biggest blowout of the weekend in my eyes. Michigan State at Penn State. Penn State minus 18. You want to talk about just throw all the cliches out there. What Michigan State did last week and losing to Indiana. They had every opportunity. They're up 24-7 and then lost in overtime or double overtime, I think it was to Indiana. They blew their opportunity. Now, I can they go to Penn State and win? If Penn State plays really poorly, and I don't see that happen. They're actually playing pretty well. I'm going to go with Penn State. I think Penn State says, forget you, minus the 18. That's a lot of points, I know, but Michigan State, they blew their chance to go to a bowl game, and I think it's really a bad look for this program.
Yeah, I'm in the same thought process as you. Penn State's clearly the third best team in the league. And even though this is a trophy game, it doesn't really feel like a trophy game. A lot of times I don't see that. And then there was the news a few hours ago that charges have been filed against 7 Michigan State players. So they've got that to deal with this week. Penn State's playing for a New Year's Six bowl. So it is playing for something. And I think it's a far better team in a lot better shape right now as a program. So even though that's a lot of points in a rivalry game, I still feel comfortable taking the better team here that's in a better position and is playing at home.
No question. So we've been the same throughout. Here it is. Okay, I'm not even going to – this isn't a joking one. The best rivalry in college football. Michigan at Ohio State. 2-3 in the polls, undefeated. Winner will go places, loser will not. I think Ohio State minus 7.5. I like 7.5.
I hate that hook, man.
I'm going to go with Michigan because of the hook. I think Ohio State wins this game. I think it's going to be a hard-fought game. I think Ohio State wins, but I think Michigan covers. I like the 7.5.
Yeah, I think Ohio State is the winner of this game. It's really looking at that number, looking at that 7.5 and saying, will Michigan be able to stay within a touchdown? I think it can, but I also think Ohio State wants to lay the wood here. And if it gets a chance offensively, which I think it has the superior offense here, I think it can cover that 7.5. I'm going to take the Buckeyes.
Okay.
And, even though Ryan Day was born on third base, I think that one's stuck in his craw for the last year. And I think Ohio State's going to be ready.
Yeah. And if anybody could lay the wood to the other, they will. There could be 20 seconds left and you're up by a touchdown. And instead of kneeling, you're going to throw that damn touchdown pass, or you're going to run it in the end zone if you're on the 1 yard line, because this is Ohio State, Michigan. Yep. And Ryan Day got the plum job of the century, but with jobs like that come expectations. You can have a job like that at Michigan State and feel good about yourself at 11-1 or whatever. You lose at Michigan and you're the Ohio State coach, or you do the vice versa thing. You live it. They don't let you forget it. And he lost it last year. They were not the best team on the field, and that was proven. So I could totally see that. And I think Marvin Harrison's the best player on the field. He is a unique talent, wide receiver at a place that's had a lot of unique talents. I don't think that they're what I think is Ohio State is up by like 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and Michigan claws back and loses by a touchdown. So it's like 34-27 or something like that. I don't see Michigan winning, but I see them fighting. Finally, the most important game of the weekend locally, Nebraska at Iowa, minus 10.5, Rob. That's an interesting number. I don't usually like, and that's the Bet Rivers number. I usually don't like that number for Iowa against anybody. And I've kind of been round and round, does Nebraska play hard? Does Nebraska give up? And does Iowa squeeze enough ketchup out of the bottle on offense and slam the door on defense? I'm going to go Iowa. I just think that Iowa can make a statement. They're in a good place mentally. They're a tough team. They're going to pull it out and win decisively.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on this week, Scott, with the things, the kind of the views that you just mentioned. Will Nebraska have anything left in the tank? Will it put up a fight? What's its pride level as a program right now to put up a fight against Iowa? Iowa's just got so much momentum right now, and by far the two best units on the field in its defense and special teams. So I don't, again, like the Michigan Ohio State game. I hate that hook because it could be a 10-point game. But I think as the week has gone on here, I felt stronger about Iowa's ability to lay a thumping here. Not saying that's going to happen, but I think that's a possible scenario in this game, and I feel better about it. And I could see Iowa winning this thing like 31-10, 34-10, something like that. So for me, it's the Hawkeyes. And I brought this up earlier in the year, and I hadn't forgotten about it again and looked. I played the Bet Rivers contest. I finished second. After winning the basketball March Madness, I finished second in the football.
It's not bad.
But I placed a futures back in August. Iowa over 7.5 wins, Iowa to win the Big Ten West. Got pretty good numbers on that. So I'm expecting to cash those, and I'm going to go out and buy some craft beer that I usually won't buy because it's too expensive for the holidays. That's what I'm going to do with my winnings.
There's no place like home for the holidays, Rob. And that's where Nebraska will be. And Iowa will be on Friday. So, yes, I'm picking the Hawkeyes minus 10.5. I think you're right. I think we go back to Indy. Don't know what happens there, but I think this will be a good one.
And that'll do it. That'll really do it this time.
Yeah.
I didn't forget anything else, I hope. That is a part of our Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. Thank you to the sponsors. Thank you, everybody, for listening throughout the season. Scott and I will be back next week, one way or the other, but most likely we will be previewing Iowa against either Michigan or Ohio State in Indianapolis next week. So didn't think we'd be doing that a month ago, Scott. So it's kind of cool that we're going to get a chance to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a month ago. It was like, well, can they even get to Detroit?
Yes.
Yeah, that seemed to be, it's like, well, they could beat Northwestern probably. Can they win any others? Definitely not Purdue. I think we even did a countdown of which was the most likely games they could win, and Purdue was 5th, and that's been the most decisive win thus far.
Yeah. What we think we know, we don't really know. And perception at the beginning of the season oftentimes does not end up as reality as the season goes on. And that's why we play the games. It's fun. It's a cliche, but it's true. And happy Thanksgiving to you and Meredith and the kids, Scott. Hope you guys have a great holiday.
Yeah, same with you, Rob. I hope you and the family enjoy it, and I look forward to seeing you on the field. And it'll be a nicer day than what you experienced in quite a while.
Yes, it will be nice. Thank you to everybody again for listening. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there. We're not quite as festive for Thanksgiving. Our big holiday is coming up next month, Festivus. So we'll be much more festive for Festivus. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the game on Friday, and then enjoy the basketball and the wrestling and all of that good stuff. Happy Thanksgiving. We'll talk